Hello. Hi, everybody. Hi, Adrian. He was first. Rarely ever first, but there he is. Hi, Nina. Thank you for coming in. Today, we are going to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, this is a theory on motivation. So on Wednesday, for those of you who were not in Shadow Work Wednesday, it came up that psychological concepts can be applied to a sociological sphere. So something that applies for a person, and we were talking about shadow work, can also be applied to a collective of people or a movement or what's another way I put it? Sociological groups, collectives of people. And when we talk about their development. And so what I decided to, okay, now Adrian and Nina are going to have a battle about being first. Hi, Indigo Flow. Thanks for coming in. So Maslow's hierarchy was brought up, and this is something I did a video on, gosh, probably almost 2 years ago, back in the beginning. Do not go back because the new videos in 2024 are much better. So we're going to talk about it again. And so, spoiler alert, and we better have enough time. I think that Maslow's explains the matrix perfectly. And so we're going to talk about that. And I don't mean the movie. I mean the actual, we're talking about our societal structure right now, the matrix. So I'm going to go through, we're going to talk about what Maslow's is and how it's a theory on motivation. And then we'll talk about how you can apply it to movements or collectives of people. And then I'm going to talk about what the matrix is. And we're going to use Maslow's for that. Hi, Adric. Thanks for coming in. Hi, Leon. Thanks for coming in. Leon says Maslow's hierarchy of needs combined with capitalism and wanting to be a higher class and a disease. Listen, I don't disagree. Okay, but first, before I get started, because I have to leave myself notes to stay on track. The Cash App is in the chat. I am saving up to be able to pay for StreamYard so that I can show videos, I can pull up infographics, I can have people up on panels, because I'm not quite to the point to be monetized. So there aren't any super chats or anything like that. So the Cash App is there if you would like to help with that. I would like to be able to get StreamYard. Thank you to the Patreons, Maurice Novembre, Devin, Judah Orenda, Adra Kapoy, Question Everything, and Mrs. KP Bailey. You, along with the subscribers, are why I do what I do, and I couldn't keep going without that support. I appreciate you guys so much. And now hopefully I'll remember to check the Cash App. Okay, so let's talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Abraham Maslow was an American psychologist. I am going to preface this with, because I tend to look at this for people who make theories, Maslow was a raging racist. So let's keep that in mind. On his hierarchy of needs, he said that Black people could not reach the top because they are too barbaric. Okay, so we have that in mind, that this is a raging racist who made this. Now, when we look at his theories, what we see is that it is a good theory of human motivation. And of course, it applies to all human beings. So that's what we're sticking with. All right. Thank you, Toya, for the $10 Cash App, and thank you, Leon, for the $5 Cash App. It's going. I'm going to be on StreamYard before we know it. Okay, thank you guys so much. So what we find when we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that it does apply to humans, and that the theory itself is sound. His gatekeeping of it is not. So we are going to eat the fish, leave the bones, as far as Maslow is concerned. Now, what he talked about was the reason it's a theory of motivation is because without motivation, there is no movement, right? There is no growth. So what makes a person want to grow? And for his theory, it was there are certain needs in stages of development. And when all of the needs are met in a stage of development, you can and often do move to the next stage. And then these are needs that you have for that stage of development. And so if you look up, see, this is where I wish I could have an infographic. But if you look up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's a triangle and there are just stages as it goes to the top. So at the very, very bottom is called physiological needs. And so these are like air, food, water, shelter, clothing, sleep. These are our base needs. So as an example, somebody who is unhoused or homeless on the street, their entire motivation for action is based on physiological needs, right? So they can breathe. We're going to assume they can breathe, but food, water, shelter, clothing, sleep are the needs that are the motivation. They don't have the bandwidth or the wherewithal or the motivation to be thinking about like morality, let's say, because if you're unhoused and you're on the street and you are starving, you are going to steal food from the store. You are going to, I don't care who you are, you're going to steal food, right? And your motivation is because you have physiological needs. You're not thinking about the morality of that. You're starving. Okay, so the next one up from there is safety and security. And that is like health, employment, property, um, having family around, having social abilities, ability to be able to move around socially. The next one up from that is love and belonging. So once you've got the safety and security under control, you're going to move into love and belonging. This is friendship, family, having a family, intimacy, and a sense of connection. Okay. Once you've got that stable, you're going to move into self-esteem. Esteem is just the way you think about something. Like if you hold something in esteem, it's important to you. Okay. So self-esteem is confidence, achievement, and the need to be unique or special. Like what makes me special kind of thing. Once you've figured that out, I don't know how many people we know who have that all figured out. It's probably, a very few amount of people. We reach self-actualization. And this is where we move into morality, creativity, our life's purpose, our meaning, our potential, those kind of things. So that self-actualization is what we're all moving towards in our motivation. We're moving up that ladder. Okay. So again, Maslow says this is what motivates our growth. So you can kind of think about where you're at in your life. Then you can also think about how you can move up and down. Somebody may be at love and belonging or self-esteem and lose their job, lose their apartment, and become homeless, right? And then we move right back down to physiological needs. Or maybe every day you're moving up and down a little bit. It's not static. This isn't a ladder that you're just climbing all the time. There's movement that happens. Now, a lot of us wake up every day and our physiological needs are met. And so we don't have to have that struggle every single day, or our physiological and our safety and security is pretty met. And so we start every day, in love and belonging or self-esteem or self-actualization. So it's not a static movement. We can move around. Now, according to Maslow, once you reach self-actualization, you actually don't move around because you view the world differently. Possibly he's equating it to something like being awakened. And so you just view these things differently. But I'm going to tell you right now, if I woke up tomorrow homeless and starving, I'm going to steal food. So self-actualized or not, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to let myself starve to death. I'm just not. Okay. So, hi, Mr. Shig, to you. Thank you for coming in. Leon says, I wish he would have put becoming God at the top of the pyramid. Ooh, we're going to get esoteric. One of these days, I'm going to do a live and we're going to talk about metaphysics, because that's a big thing for me. Gnosticism, metaphysics, quantum physics. And there's this new thing I want to get into. This is a side note. Also, why I make notes. Quantum physics just discovered that the future affects the timeline of the past more than the past affects the timeline of the future. And at some point, I'm going to get into this with you guys, because digging into this theory, at first, when you hear it, you're like, that literally makes no logical sense whatsoever. But then when you read into it and you look at the quantum string theory of timelines, it makes perfect sense. So that's where we're at with that. I'm not going to talk too much about quantum physics today, but I will at some point. Okay, so let's apply Maslow's to political or societal groups, movements, or collectives of people. So we're now taking it from the micro, being the person, and bringing it out a little bit to the next sphere of influence. Okay. So on that bottom one, physiological needs. Okay. So for a collective of people, those physiological needs, again, if you have a collective of people who can't get food, clean water, shelter, clothing, sleep, those kind of things, are you going to be able to get a movement going or create a civilization or create great art, or you're just not, right? So this is where we have to take into account, for a group of people, the economic caste systems that are inherent to Western cultures. There's an economic caste that you're kind of born into. Now you can, to a certain extent, move out of the caste that you're born into. It's not like in others, like caste systems that we've heard of before, where once you're this, you're always this. Okay. It's more of an economic caste system. So for a group of people, a group of people may be born into the physiological needs according to the economic caste, whereas certain other people may be born into love and belonging stage, because everything else is already taken care of, because of where they've been born into in this economic caste system. So when we look at maybe a movement, right, what stage is the movement starting at? Okay. And what is the basis of the movement? So as an example, when we look at the movement for reparations, the movement for reparations starts at the physiological needs, right? Because a group of people, American descendants of slavery or foundational Black Americans, have been degraded and oppressed into that stage for hundreds of years. So the reparations movement starts at the physiological needs need to be met, and then it builds from there. But that's also another reason why reparations is money, not just that historically reparations equals a check, like for every other time we paid reparations, but also because it includes the physiological needs. So that's cash, just as an example. So when we move up into safety and security, this is where we look at movements that look at rights versus laws. So it appears when we look at our country, there are certain people who have inherent rights and other people don't. And then there's certain people that the laws are made to control and suppress. So we look at, is a movement about a right to something, or is it about how laws have been made to degrade those people? That's in safety and security, but then also free access to everything. So you can kind of put that under rights, but it's access to anything that the country has to offer. Like, are there things that are gate kept from a specific people? And so there's a movement that will go along with that. I see comments. So Adrian says, just think about how much more output happens when your base needs are continually met. Exactly. Like if you're trying to just make enough money to feed yourself every day, then first of all, you're going to be exhausted, but because you're not eating, right? But when you're able to move up, there's much more creativity too, and you have much more motivation. This is also why it's a triangle. Like things get focused in, and you do get a much more output when your base needs, when you're like animal needs, like I am alive, so I need food, water, shelter. Okay. Leon says, yes, I had said it a million times that America has a caste system. You can single-handedly John Henry yourself out of the class, but everyone cannot be John Henry. And here's the problem with being John Henry is you die. You die young, right? So you John Henry your way out of that, but you've created so much stress and trauma and toil on yourself just to be able to move out of where you're at, that you end up with heart disease, diabetes, things like that, that are prevalent in communities that have to toil so hard just to meet basic needs. Adrian says, rights versus laws, preach. I got it from you. Social dominance theory 101. Yep. Yeah. Jim Sedanius. Yes. So if anybody's looking to read things about what I'm talking about and what they're talking about, Jim Sedanius that's where you need to go. Okay. So we talked about safety and security. The next one up, love and belonging. So this is like acceptance of lifestyle, how you want to live your life, acceptance of and being able to have family structures the way that you want, and then also acceptance and purpose towards religion and culture. So this is where, we may have the right to do things, but there's not acceptance there, right? Because this is love and belonging section. This is what my group of people want, how we want to set up family structures, or what our culture is, or what our family structure is accepted and approved by society as a whole. Hi, Compassionate and Callous. Thank you for coming in. Okay, so the next one up from that is self-esteem. Well, again, we are applying this to a collective of people. So again, esteem, holding something in esteem, is thinking positive thoughts about it, having good thoughts about it. So for a group of people, this would be about being seen and appreciated. Okay. Being appreciated for uniqueness and contribution and being special. Okay. So I think we can all understand that one, like as a group of people, especially when the one before that, love and belonging, is about culture and family. And then the top one, self-actualization, again, for a group of people, would be full incorporation into the societal structure. Now, to understand how we can apply this to groups of people, I'm going to talk about some movements. Okay, I already talked about reparations movement starts at physiological needs, and then there are parts of it that are all parts of Maslow's, right? Because if you start at the bottom, you need the whole thing. Okay. And it's not that every single individual needs the whole thing, but enough people are in the physiological that's where you got to start. Okay. So when we talk about racial equity movements, civil rights movements, about racial equity. Again, especially because we're talking about reparations, that's one that starts at physiological needs in reaction to the way the government and society has treated. And when we talk about the United States, for a vast majority of its existence, has been Black people and white people with very few other people. We've only more recently in modern times become more of a melting pot. But where the political power has been white people and Black people. So racial equity movements start at physiological and have to add all the things on there. So you can see how much of a battle that is. For example, ADOS or FBA people, again, foundational Black Americans or American descendants of slavery, have only really been free to do any of the other things on the triangle for about 50 years. So, for instance, up until civil rights, there was no freedom. And so you can't move up in Maslow's, even if you had motivation to do so, you're not allowed. And so as a group of people, they're only about 50 years old. Shout out to Adrian Hicks, who utilized that and opened my eyes about that they're really, as a civilization of people, are only about 50 years old. And so having, society having expectations of this was so far in the past, why aren't you over it? And, why can't you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps? If we talk about a civilization of people, 50 years is nothing. It's nothing. And so, the response to being able for people to move, because you could make the argument that that freedom in the last 50 years is still not complete freedom. You could argue, is to leave people alone, right? So we have reparations on one end. Let's meet the physiological needs of being kept, but also leaving that group of people to develop, leave them alone. You can think about like during Reconstruction and even after, towns burned and people killed and towns flooded. And so ADOS is an example. That movement is in that category. And like if you think of the Romans, when the Romans were 50 years old, what were they doing? Nothing. It is nothing in terms of a group of people. It's just no time. Okay. Now, if we move up into safety and security, this is where we get like the feminist movement. Their physiological needs were met. And I could go on and on and on about the feminist movement and how actually racist it is and was, and neo-feminism, I don't even want to talk about right now. But when we talk about rights versus laws, again, feminism, at least the way that it was sold to women at the time, was about having rights to employment, rights to property, rights to divorce, and being able to have children, and then like social access, so social ability, ability to things. So feminism, that movement, those asks started from a safety and security perspective, but it was more about access to things. Then like the LGBT movement starts at love and belonging. So, accepting a lifestyle, accepting a family structure, accepting how people live. So it starts because all their other needs are met: safety and security, physiological. And I'm not saying 100% of the time or every single person. I'm talking about collectives of people and movements. And then when we look into self-esteem, when we talk about immigrants' rights, that's the area that it starts from, is from that self-esteem of being seen and appreciated for uniqueness. And this is all immigrants. So this is like the Irish coming in, or all the way up to Hispanic people coming across the border and wanting immigrants' rights. It starts at that much, much higher level of Maslow's needs. So when you talk about where does the focus need to be for equity in our country, we don't necessarily start with people who already have most of their needs met. We start on people who need to be able to breathe and have clean water and places to live and have suffered the most degradation. Um, so that's just a way to look at like political movements developmentally through Maslow's hierarchy. Okay. All right. Wanted to check the comments. Okay. So while I'm reminding myself, well, Adric reminded me about the Cash App. All right. Thank you, Matthew, for the Cash App. Appreciate you very much for the, let's see, for the work. I like it. I like it. All right. So now the bigger thing that I wanted to talk about, which is why I jumped through that really quickly, is that you can see that individual psychological theories, including shadow work or Maslow's, Erickson's stages of development, can all be applied to collective groups of people. Okay. But I want to talk about when I started writing all this down and I was thinking about political movements, I was like, wait, something was clicking for me, and I had to process it and think on it, and then I realized Maslow's explains the matrix. So we're going to talk about it as soon as I make sure I'm hydrated. All right. So does anybody want me to go into the matrix? Because I don't know. I would think anybody who follows me probably has a base understanding, or at least their understanding of the matrix. For some people, it's slightly different. Um, for some people, it's slightly more metaphysical. For other people, it's pretty grounded in how society is set up, is the matrix. Um, but so I kind of think people understand. But when we talk about, okay, so Nina said yes, and Leon says, yeah, you can. So the idea of the matrix, the idea of it does come from the movie. That's where we got the label for it, right? And even the movie The Matrix itself was it was based on a book that was written by a Black woman who the whole story was then stolen by some white guys, and she had to take them to court, after the movie comes out, and it's a whole thing. But she herself states that she wrote the Matrix, the movie The Matrix, based on sort of this sci-fi take on racism and the way society is set up. So in the movie, there's a guy, Neo, and he is approached by a man named Morpheus. I don't remember all the details of the movies, guys, so please correct me when I get stuff wrong, because I know I will. But he can either take a blue pill and just go on about life, or he can take a red pill and he will be removed from the matrix. And so he does take the red pill, and he sort of wakes up in this pod, and there's like millions of people in a pod, and it's really like a toilet flushing. He gets flushed out of the system, and then he finds out that Earth is like this nasty post-war apocalypse, pain, misery, terrible place to be, right? And that his job is to save it. And it's sort of like the Matrix is set up like this giant computer program that the people who are plugged into the Matrix are just living their life with occasionally seeing glitches, like glitches in the timeline, or we might call it. But they don't really pay it any mind. They're just living their regular lives, but really the energy from their bodies is like batteries to this alien race that took over the world. So hopefully I got that mostly right. So we use the term the matrix when we talk about how society is set up, that there is a matrix, that we, through our indoctrination, or well, I'm just going to say indoctrination. Through our indoctrination, we are plugged into the matrix. And so how we were born and what we were told and how we were raised all just sort of leads this fake existence when things aren't really real. Okay. So we look at how does Maslow's explain the matrix? Like we just talked about political groups, okay? Adric says, put me back in the matrix. And isn't it terrible that you'd have to lose your memory? Because once you see the matrix for what it is, you can't stop knowing what you know. It's like they would have to remove your memory for you to plug back in. And ignorance can be bliss, Dr. Johnson is in here. Hi, Dr. Johnson. Thank you for coming in. And thank you for reminding people to hit the like button. I appreciate that. So if we talk about the matrix as a societal structure, right? When we look at governmental and societal suppression or control, that was the rabbit hole I was going down. And then I was like, that's the matrix. So physiological needs. So if we start at physiological needs, and how is this societal suppression and control? So there's a theory that I use, and these are my words, okay? And I call it the cost of doing business. And it is based on, it costs money to have drinkable water. So I have to pay to be able to drink water, which is a basic physiological need. But then when I evacuate the urine from that water in my home and flush it, I have to pay a monthly water bill and sewer fee to get rid of the urine. So I call it the cost of doing business. So you have to pay for the food and you have to pay for the waste. So this cost of doing business, as an example, governments plant only male trees in like city and state owned areas. So sides of the road, easements, those kind of things. They only plant male trees because they will not plant female trees, because female trees flower and produce fruit or nuts, and that would create free food. So they only plant male trees, so there's no free food, which is why we have such an epidemic with allergies, because the trees the male trees produce pollen and they put it out into the air, and there's no female trees to grab the pollen so that they can flower and produce nuts and fruit. So this is that cost of doing business. I have to pay for the food. I have to pay for the way. I've got to pay coming in and I've got to pay going. So that's the cost of doing business. And in any way where I could get access to free food, which the earth wants to just provide, like it's set up like that, I am gate kept from it and have to pay for it. If you think about it, apple trees were planted everywhere around, pear trees in more tropical places is orange groves and all that. And it's all gate kept because that's free food and you are not allowed to have it. You can only have it if you can pay for it. Okay. So I see a lot of comments. Hi, Spain Man. Thank you for coming in. Jason Muex, thanks for coming in. Co-modification. Yes. Yeah, they got you coming and going. Uh-huh. And Spain Man says, ain't that a bee? Yes. Right. But again, we're talking about governmental society and suppression, and this is the matrix. So we're talking at the base level, right? Then you have something I call existence tax, which is it costs money to be born. So the moment you are born, there is a debt. There's already a debt. Okay. It costs money to be in the hospital. It costs money to get a midwife. It costs money. Then they make you get immunizations and they make you get the PKU test and you have to do all this in the hospitals. And not only that, they charge you exorbitant fees for all these things. Like one Advil is $45. You know, it's for instance, for the mother to provide her with maxi pads and things that she's going to need because she's going to bleed for a while after giving birth. They're charging 10, 15, $20 per pad. And so when you come into the world, you are already in debt. And based on your kind of caste system is how much debt you are in, which keeps you in that sociological caste system. Like the lower they want you to be, the bigger the debt it is just to exist, right? So we understand the physiological needs, right? Like you're never going to have free food. We're never going to allow the earth to take care of you. You're going to have to pay for things coming in and for going out, and you're in debt from the moment you're born. And the amount of debt is based upon where we want you in the caste system. Okay. So Compassionate and Callous says they actually charge for skin to skin, i.e. the mother getting to hold the baby immediately after birth, which is not holding my own child. Like, we're literally charging me for me holding my baby. And I'm sure they probably do that for fathers too, because fathers also do skin to skin a lot. So just because they got to stand there and watch you hold your own baby, we made her or him. we can handle it. We'll ask you if we need to know how to hold a baby. It's just crazy. It's crazy. Ugh. Okay. So let's move on. Explaining the matrix. Safety and security, right? Safety and security is about health, employment, property, family, social ability. I got a lot on this one. So, rights to healthcare, right? It costs a lot of money. And your access to healthcare is also, again, based upon your social caste, right? And then they'll do things like, well, we'll give you state insurance, we'll give you Medicaid or Medicare. But then everything that you're allowed to do or who you're allowed to see or the quality of the healthcare that you get is regulated, i.e. gate kept by the government. So healthcare not being a universal right is in that safety and security that your ability to access preventative healthcare, again, is based upon your caste system. Because do you have the wherewithal and the access to that universal healthcare? The second one on safety and security is employment equity. Do I have access to the same jobs? Before that, do I have access to the same education? Can I go get the electrician's certificate because I want to be an electrician? Do I have access to that? Is it in my neighborhood? Is it in my budget? Is it, am I able to get there to and from? Because that will lead me to employment equity. And then, we have just the rollback of affirmative action, which wasn't doing what it was intended to do completely, but I mean, I guess it was something. That was just repealed, right? Possibly too many people were moving up the caste system. So this was a way to ensure the continued placement in the caste system, in the matrix, where you're supposed to be by repealing that. Credit ratings, that is part of the matrix, right? Because again, based on your family of origin will also tell you how high your credit rating goes. So credit rating was supposed to be an answer to not doing redlining, but it actually has done more damage to people in the lower parts of the caste system by having this credit rating. It just continues to gatekeep things. Think about it this way. Credit rating will tell a person you can't afford $900 a month for a house payment. So you need to go continue paying $1,400 a month in rent. How much sense does that make? It's access, it's gatekeeping, right? So if I buy a house, I'm actually going to have money to save and be able to do these other things that I need to do for my own growth or for my family or my collective growth. But it's gate kept based on a non arbitrary number, right? Which can be influenced by things that the wealthy and the economics understand more than the average person. But again, if I'm just looking for a house to live in, I don't have the bandwidth to go get the certificate in economics to understand this freaking credit rating, because it is confusing on purpose. We'll just say that. Some people understand it really well. And even when they try to explain it to me, I'm still like, it sounds arbitrary and dumb. But that's my opinion. I'm a therapist. I'm definitely not an economist. Okay. So, Mom Brinkley is in here. Hi, thank you for coming in. Yeah, repeal of affirmative action, or what I call placism. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, Kind of going back to employment equity and affirmative action, something I want to talk about is I use the word equity, not equality. So, for instance, and there was an infographic about a meme about this a while back, and it's always something that's really stuck with me. So, if we imagine there are three children trying to watch a baseball game, but there are those plastic things that are through the fence, right? So you really can't see through the fence. But there's three children trying to watch a baseball game. And you have one child that the fence goes to just above the eyebrow line. And so if that child gets up on their tippy toes or pulls themselves up a little bit, they can see the game. They may get a little tired and have to come back down, but they can stay up and they can watch the baseball game. And then you have a child who is it's like 4 feet down. There's like 4 feet between the top of this child's head and the top of the fence. There's no way. There's no way. And then you have a child that is down 2 feet. 2 feet. Maybe if they jump, they can catch sight every so often. If they jump up. Now, what equality will say is everybody gets a 2-foot step ladder. That's equality. It's equal across the board. Everybody gets a 2-foot step ladder. Okay. So the child who was here, they get the 2-foot step ladder, and now they are head and shoulders above the fence. They're interacting with the players. They're yelling at people. They're catching a baseball. They got it all, right? They are super enjoying it. They can yell at the hot dog vendor and get a hot dog. They got a Coke. Everything is great. The kid that was 2 feet down, he's now at eyebrow level. So if he gets up on his tippy toes and he pulls up a little bit, he can see the game, he can catch sight. He might get a little tired and have to come back down for a minute, but he can get up there, he can see the game. The kid that was 2 feet down got a 2-foot step ladder and literally nothing changed. He still can't see the game. He can't get the hot dog, he can't get the Coke, he can't say hi to the players. He can't participate. That's equality. That's how equality works. This whole think about all lives matter and all this, and if they get this and everybody's got to get that, that's crap. So I talk about equity. So in equity, everybody would be brought to the same height. So the kid who needs 8 inches of a stepladder gets 8 inches of a stepladder. And the kid who is 4 foot down gets 4.5 feet of stepladder. And the kid who's 2 feet down gets 2.5 feet of stepladder. And then everything is equal. Everybody can participate. Everybody can get the hot dog. Everybody can get the Coke, and everybody can interact with the players. That is equity. So when I use the term equity, that is why I say equity and not equality, is making things equal. I just went on a rant. I apologize. Okay. Safety and security. Hi, D. Scott. Thank you for coming in. Safety and security, the prison industrial complex. This is part of the matrix. So school to prison pipeline, right? So this is literally taking you out of the ability to even be able to move up in this triangle, right? Because how can you get into love and belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization if you are removed from it? So again, going back to the social caste system, there are people, and in this instance, when we're talking about the prison industrial complex, we're talking about Black men who can very easily get scooped up into the school to prison pipeline. Now, as an aside, but related, just in case there are people here that don't know this, slavery was not completely abolished. The 13th Amendment says that slavery is abolished except as a punishment of a federal crime. So the way to keep the workers and this type of non-paid or low-paid labor was to create this school to prison pipeline, this prison industrial complex, because if these men were charged with felonies, then slave labor is approved. Now, in this day and age, our prison industrial complex accounts for, last I checked, I believe it is $3 billion, with a B, $3 billion of our economy. And it's not the federal government paying the prison, it's that the labor in the prisons create items which are then sold to consumers. For instance, prisons, the prison industrial complex is the sole creators of military safety equipment for the United States. And how much you bet the federal government gets a deal on that, right? But because they're only paying the prisoners, what is it, $60 or 60 cents an hour, or like $1.12 an hour, or something like that. They're paying them slave wages, right? Enough to buy a ramen cup. Then they're able to make billions of dollars off of these Black men. Now, I'm not saying it's only Black men that are in prison, but I think everybody's well aware there's a disproportionate amount to society, right? And since it was, the prison complex was created off the back of the 13th Amendment, we know exactly what it was for. It was to remove Black men from the triangle and to keep them in this lowest caste system to maintain that labor and to continue billions of dollars coming in to people who could benefit from that. So that's part of the matrix. And then social access. Okay. So for instance, if you look at very poor, often predominantly, there are Black people in very poor neighborhoods. Now, please do not come at me. Black people are in every neighborhood. But what I'm saying is that because of the degradation and oppression, there are neighborhoods where it is predominantly Black people, and these are poorer areas. What kind of businesses are in the neighborhood? Is this where we go, oh, they have physiological needs, let's get a health clinic in there, let's get a community garden going, let's get, recycling plant, thrift clothes, let's get people's needs met in there. No, what the businesses that they allow to come in, and again, this is the government, remember, that allows businesses to go in areas. The businesses that they allow to come in are liquor stores, wholesale beauty supplies, pawn shops, lots of like convenience stores. Okay, so let's use that as an example. They generally don't have grocery stores in these neighborhoods. Okay, not only are we not having a community garden or any type of food share program whatsoever, we're not even having a grocery store. And so, but what is there are convenience stores. And so when you want a bottle of water, because you got to pay for it, right? And you go to the convenience store, you're paying $2 or $3 for a bottle of water. And that's $2 or $3 out of, the budget that you do have living in that area. But if you were able to go to a grocery store, you could spend $5 and get a 24 pack. But because the access is not there, that helps keep you, because you're having to spend more money to get the same things than in, different neighborhoods where they have more economic access, and then they get the cheap prices for stuff. Go back to that rental versus buying. They get to buy the house and pay $900 a month, where you're still paying $1,400 in rent. So again, it's the social aspect or access to things. So moving up to love and belonging. D. Scott says equality equals me quality for many. Yeah. If you get something, I get something. Because life was hard for me too, right? There's that kid who the fence is at the eyebrows. And I have to struggle too. We've all been through struggles. But at least you saw the game. You saw something. I'm over here looking at people's feet. Okay. So moving up into love and belonging. Love and belonging, remember again, is about friendship, family, intimacy, sense of connection. Okay. But now we're talking about the matrix, love and belonging. This is where we get into media narrative. So we are inundated with an approved media narrative. And the media narrative tells us about ourselves and what is acceptable. Okay. Now, a lot of times in the United States, it's very politically charged, right? They'll come at you and say, the left is saying this, so the right said this, and the right is doing this, so the left did this, and they think this, and they think that, and they play on our otherisms and our want to other people, and also to have a bad guy in our story, that they're creating this media narrative. So there's been, as an example, there's been studies on little girls and the being inundated with the media perception of what is beautiful, and how it creates just this terrible self-esteem because they're not measuring up to the models, right? Now, it also depends on what models you're seeing, right? But there's that media narrative of what is beautiful, right? Adria Capoy just says filters, right? Like we play into it. Now people have created all these filters, and we can catfish everybody by turning on beauty filters or even turning on background filters, and it makes it look like you're somewhere else. And now we have AI even to do even more stuff. But this media narrative tells you who you are as an American, as a Black person, as a white person, as a man, as a woman, as a Dr. Johnson does the Onyx Media Test. He just created. If you guys have not checked this out, check it out. It is it's a test that you put against like movies and media to see how Black men are portrayed. And it was based off of, I always forget the name of it. I always want to call it Dunning-Kruger, and it's not, but it's two last names on this test, but which was originally created by feminists that would give a score to movies based on how women are portrayed. And so Dr. Johnson made a test for how Black men are portrayed. And it's super interesting and very valid, because sometimes we're just watching stuff and we don't realize how indoctrinated we're getting just off of a cartoon or just a little happy movie. Or we could be watching something where like, that bugs me and I don't know why. But it's because we're fed this media narrative about who we are and then who other people are, without actually ever going and doing the work to figure out who I am and then how does that make me relate to other people. So we have the media narrative indoctrination coming at us all the time. And so and a lot of it is based on othering other people. Okay, like, that's not me, so they're bad, I'm good. And then we have, in this love and belonging stage, we have our place of indoctrination. So again, going back to the matrix is set upon this social caste system, our place of indoctrination can change depending upon how soon the narrative needs to get to you to get you indoctrinated into a certain way. So think about, like I had mentioned, the school to prison pipeline. There's indoctrination that has to start with school age children, and even before, in preschool age. Where are all the child head start, where are all those programs? Think about that. How soon does the indoctrination need to start to ensure that you're put into that place where we tell you that you belong? And we're going to make sure you stay there. We're going to put all our might into making sure that you stay there. Okay. Nina says, I stopped watching regular TV a while back and it's been amazing. Oh, same. I don't watch the news because I think there's just too much indoctrination, and there's too much they said this and they did that and and I, once you kind of see the matrix, you question everything and you're just like, meh. Unless I can go research it myself, I don't have any time for it. Okay, so while we're paused here, let me check. Okay. All right. So we're going to move into self-esteem, talking about the matrix. So remember, self-esteem is confidence, achievement, the need to be unique and special. So we're talking about the matrix. I got a ton here too. There's a phrase that's used, and it's his story instead of history. So when we talk about confidence, achievement, the need to be unique and special and seen, right, for your accomplishments, to the victor goes the spoils, and the victor gets to write the narrative, right? So this is where history is suppressed, books are burned, things are negated, stories are rewritten. And so when you're told things about yourself and all of the history and everything about who you are and people that are like you is rewritten and hidden, then you don't get to find that sense of achievement. You don't get to be what makes you and people like you unique and special. And so that's part of the matrix, is ensuring that the history is not told that negates the way the matrix is set up. It's hidden, it's suppressed, or it's just completely erased. Then we move into this really interesting concept in the matrix, where on one hand you have toxic individualism, but on the other hand you have individual deniability. So, and even a third step from that would be collective accountability. So it's this weird interplay. So toxic individualism is sort of like, if I work really hard and I create a company, and that company ends up taking off and I make billions of dollars, then anytime we talk about this company, it is the Maggie Thompson company. So we have this, when it comes to reward and praise, we have this individualism of wanting that reward and praise. It was all me. I did it. Even though I literally just said built a company. How would I have built a company that's making billions of dollars without anyone? All by myself. You couldn't do it, right? And so we have this very, I'm special because I'm an individual and any success I have is solely mine and I get to keep it. Then we have the individual deniability. Okay. So this is where if someone like me does something that's against the social norms, that's not me. This is how they're different. Okay. So as an example, when the mass shooting happened where the kid dressed up like Joker and he was in a movie theater and was shooting and killing people, then the immediate response was he's mentally ill. He's not us. He's mentally ill. And so we have this individual deniability. We can take an individual, other that person, and say that is not indicative of us, right? Even though when we look at mass shooters, these are young white males. But every time it happens, and I'm not saying it's 100% young white males, but we're looking at statistically significantly young white males. But instead of looking at what the heck is going on that we have these young white males performing mass murder, every time it happens, we figure out a way to other him, to have this individual deniability. He's not me, he's that. Makes sense? And lastly, we have collective accountability. So for collective accountability, if you are lower in the caste system, then anything an individual does is now indicative of the collective. So if we have somebody steals a car and goes on a rampage, okay, and the person happens to be a young black man. So instead of young white men, we'll use young black men. Happens to be a young black man. Then the narrative starts to become, you know how young black men are. They steal cars, they're thugs. They break the law, they all do. And that becomes the narrative. And so it becomes this collective accountability for an individual's process, but only when you're lower in the caste system. So this self-esteem part has these really what seems dialectical or dichotomous type of things, but it depends on where you are to be able to maintain the caste system. So we have the toxic individualism, the individual deniability, but then the collective accountability for what the least of you do, any mistakes they made or bad behavior that happened, you're now all accountable and it applies across the board. But for us, nothing anybody does applies to us. Hell no. That's somebody else. Now I'll just make sure they are othered. And a lot of times they say mental illness, don't they? They're mentally ill. Look at their manifesto that we were watching the whole time. Okay, so moving forward, self-actualization, right? When we get to the top of self-actualization, this is actually not the top of the caste system, because the top of the caste system is self-esteem. Because the way that our government, the way that the matrix is set up is that the people at the very top treat everybody else almost like a narcissistic relationship. They are the best. They're how they want the country to be known and seen. They are the ego, right? They are this is the narrative. They set the narrative. They do the gaslighting. They do changing reality. They do all of that. That's at the self-esteem level. So if you're actually able to work through your own self-actualization, if you're actually able to get to that point doing the work or the shadow work or, however you want to phrase it. When you get to that point, you go off grid, you go red pill, you go black pill. Because what you realize is you see the entire matrix, right? And you're like, I'm just not going to participate. You remove yourself from the matrix, from the caste system. Now, is society, the real world, the 3D or whatever people want to call it, is it still interacting with you and you still got to pay your rent? Of course. But you no longer support the matrix or the caste system the way that it's set up. You become an agitator. You become, as Roger Reports refers to them, habitual line steppers, right? You become an agitator. You start doing things. You start telling the actual history, the actual narratives, the real truth about everything. So you're either going to go off grid and go completely out of the matrix and no longer even like accessible by the social caste system or the matrix, or you're going to take the red pill, like in the movie, right? You're going to flush yourself out of the matrix and you're going to start fighting the war against, or you're going to become black pill, which to my understanding is being nihilistic. Like, just burn the whole thing down and we'll start over. Okay. But you stop playing the game and you question everything when you reach a point of self-actualization. So the top is actually that self-esteem level, because that's where the ego of the matrix system lies. They set up the computer program so they control what we see, what we hear, what we experience, what we feel and touch. That's where it lies. And the whole point is for you to never get to self-actualization, because if you check out of the game or you become an agitator, it does not maintain the whole system. So all the comments stopped. So either everybody's got this playing in the background or I'm being so woo-woo, nobody knows what to say. But these were the thoughts that I had about, Toya says we are glued. But this was the thought I had when I was looking at and trying to write up my notes for talking about collectives of people or political movements, and plugging that into Maslow's, is that we as an entire nation can be plugged into Maslow's, and that's the matrix, because it's all about the suppression and control to keep people in economic caste system. And so I don't have answers for how we fix it, right? It doesn't mean that I'm not going to keep doing what I do. What I do is point out the information, be an agitator by telling the truth, finding the stuff, doing the research, putting it out there, getting more people, and making sure people understand things, but then also taking correction and learning things when I get it wrong. But getting it wrong is never going to make me stop trying. But I think it's a good way to explain or to visualize. I'm a visual learner. To visualize what the matrix is, that it's this whole web of economic caste system about power and control and suppression. And so if you think about where you are personally on Maslow's and moving up that system, and then where you are sociologically in that caste system, where do you lie? And that the point is to get to that self-actualization, so you can remove yourself, see it for what it is, and figure out what is your job, or what are you going to do, or what is your potential to create change to bring it down. Okay. All right. Nina says this has been great. Spain Man says background listening, still here. Okay, good. So, and we're over an hour. But hopefully this was interesting to people. Hopefully it resonated with you, kind of like it did with me, to say, oh my gosh, I think this is a map for the matrix. If not, I understand. But again, I'm visual. I need it. Coming up, some important things coming up on Monday. I'm going to be over at Toya's channel, and we're going to be talking about women's propensity to drama. So if you've not subscribed to Toya, please go do so. She's got it posted up, so go hit the bell notification. We'll be talking about that on Monday at, she's got it set for 2:25. So be sure to come in for that. Subscribe to her if you haven't already. And then on Wednesday, we're going to continue on the Wednesday shadow work. If you guys haven't watched the first session and you want to, please go back and do that. Unfortunately, I got so excited, I tried to explain shadow work from multiple different directions and probably made it more confusing, but hopefully people hang in. And we're going to keep going with that. We're going to get into reflective questions at the next session. So that'll be on Wednesday evening. And then, of course, we'll have Sunday Subscriber's Choice next Sunday. I'll put it up in a few days, and then people can make suggestions on topics or things they want me to talk about, or psychological, mental health, relationship issues, those kind of things that I can talk on. I like to have an idea of what I'm going to talk about a few days ahead of time so that I can do research, so that I can find research that backs up what I'm saying, or theories of what I'm saying, or making sure what I'm saying is accurate. I never want to give you guys misinformation. So those important things are coming up. I'm also working on a longer video about some misinformation. It's long, and it's going to be a little while before I get it up because there's a lot of research involved, but that's upcoming, hopefully soon. Jason Muick says, how long have you been at this, Maggie? I'm not sure which at this. As far as the channel, I've actually had the channel for a year and a half or so, but I took like a 7-month hiatus because the direction I was going didn't really feel comfortable, except for I wanted to correct misinformation. So like I said, that the 2024's got the new car smell, stick with the 2024. As far as mental health, I have been in the mental health field. Well, I mean, my first job at 19 years old was at an inpatient psychiatric unit, and I was doing mental health groups at 19. I was a mental health technician. So it's been 20 something years that I've been in the mental health field. In that time, I've gotten a bunch of degrees and a bunch of letters and did a bunch of things, but experience is where it's at, and done some research. So advocacy, that's pretty much been a lifelong thing. So my parents did advocacy work, and so that's been a lifelong thing. So hopefully that answered which thing you were asking about, how long I've been at it. Yeah, Adrica Poy says drama queens. That's what we're talking about on Monday. That's what Toya and I are talking about on Monday, is drama queens. Compassionate and callous says, so basically the key is to give people just enough of Maslow's hierarchy of needs to keep them alive and producing, but not so much you become Neo. Got it? Makes sense. That's how those people at the top, they don't want you to ever become Neo. They don't want you to ever become self-actualized, because then you're going to check out of the matrix. And so they have to oppress and degrade and keep people in this caste system to keep their matrix running. Adric gave Toy the Tutor an apple. That's cute. Adric Apoy says Neo is lonely. Yeah, I mean, if we get more and more Neos, wouldn't that be great? If we could get more and more and more people checking out of the matrix. But I think what's interesting is, and I'm going to kind of reference Cat Williams here, is that there are a lot of people waking up and seeing the matrix, and doing things like questioning the motives of the United States and the behaviors and the entire social structure and how things are set up. And, Cat Williams said 2024 is when all the secrets will come out. And I think thus far, there's been a lot to come out in 2024. So I think we have more and more people waking up to it now. What we do with it, again, it's kind of a movement, right? These people who are checking out of the matrix, we as a movement are low on Maslow's hierarchy and trying to figure out who we are. We may apply more to Erickson's stages of development, but we're trying to figure it out as we go. And I'm new to being out of the matrix. I've always been sort of I've always been metaphysics, and I've always seen social structures from a different way. My parents were hippies, by the way, like actual hippies. So, and I have an auntie who's still an actual hippie. So I've seen things, but then again, you never know how deep the indoctrination is. And then as you learn things, you're just blown away. So, hopefully we'll get Neo some company. D. Scott says you have to have people plugged in to keep this mofo running, unfortunately. Yeah. So then you have the black pill people who are like, no, flush everybody. Just burn it to the ground, right? Adria Kapoy says, I admire Cypher. And Nina says, that's me. By the way, yes, Nina Williams is my auntie who is an actual hippie to this day. So, especially when we get into metaphysics and things like that, she and shadow work and stuff, she has so much good information to add to that. She's an amazing person. I love her very much. I love my auntie. Okay. I appreciate you guys giving me your time. I've gone well over the hour, and I try to be respectful of your time, especially on a Sunday. And this is a holiday for some people. I appreciate you coming in so much. I hope to see everybody tomorrow over at Toya's. Come and see us. Give Toya some love. And then come and see me on Wednesday for shadow work if you would like to. Otherwise, have a good Sunday, guys. Bye.